everybody. Welcome to Bone2Pick. I am Michael Davis, and I am honored today to be interviewing our featured artist for the month of February, the great Steve Turre. For my money, Steve has forged one of the most impressive, one of the most innovative, and most creative careers in the history of jazz trombone. He has recorded 16 CDs as a solo artist. He has toured and recorded with the virtual who's who of jazz, including the late, great Woody Shaw, Ray Charles, Dizzy Gillespie, McCoy Tyner, Art Blakey, Cedar Walton, just to name a few. He has held down the trombone chair in the Saturday Night Live band for the last 30 years, and he is currently the professor of jazz trombone at the Juilliard School. And Steve, I just want to thank you so much for taking time out of your exceptionally busy schedule to sit down with us today and talk about your extraordinary career and life in music.
My pleasure, yeah.
And also thank you for allowing us into your beautiful home here in Montclair, New Jersey. It's really nice of you to do that. I figured we'd jump right in and have you talk a little bit about what made you gravitate to the trombone and maybe some of your early memories growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Well, Mike, my older brother, whose name happens to be Mike, Michael, plays saxophone and he played clarinet too. And he played in the school band. He started in the 4th grade. So I wanted to play too, but I was 2 years younger. And you had to be in the 4th grade. I went to the band room. They said, no, you got to be in the 4th grade. Come back. So I came back, and the bandmaster said, well, what instrument do you play? And I said, well, I don't know. I don't have an instrument. And there was a picture of a marching band on the wall, with all the instruments. And I said, well, pick an instrument. So I looked up on what's in the front row of the marching band because of the slide, the trombone. I said, I'll play that one. Little did I know. Oh, that instrument, I love it to death, but it gives you fits,
Yes,
so.
indeed.
And I started in the 4th grade in the school band, beginning band, and I liked it. I liked the trombone right off, and I just stuck with it. I never quit.
That's awesome. And so did you grow up in a musical family other than your brother? Were your parents musicians as well? Or
yeah. My mom played piano, and she used to play for fashion shows and for company, and she played standards like a light stride kind of, not fast like David or nothing, but a light stride kind of style, earlier style standard. She, my parents, the music of their day was big band music. Mm-hmm. And my mom and dad actually met at a Count Basie dance.
That's great.
I'm not kidding you. So when I was little, they took me to see all the big bands. I actually saw Duke Ellington. And Ella Fitzgerald was a guest vocalist. And Coleman Hawkins was a guest soloist. And this was when I was in the 5th grade.
That's awesome.
And Clark Terry was in Duke's band then. I remember Britt Woodman was playing first trombone. Johnny Hodges played Prelude to a Kiss. I'll never forget it. I can still hear the beauty of his sound in my mind. It impressed me so much. His tone was just gorgeous. And Duke's band, that's one of the things that made me want to play this music. And I said, man, I want to do that, and it started me on the way. And then in middle school, we had a jazz band. That was my first jazz band. Funny story is that before school started, my mom took me down to the music store in Lafayette, California, the local store, and they rented me a trombone. And she said, well, you take a lesson at the music store before you go to school tomorrow, So I had my first lesson. The guy showed me how to put it together and everything, and I learned a song the first day. I just had a knack for melody and rhythm. I didn't learn, my first teacher did not teach me about embouchure or about breath control, but somehow he imparted to me musicality. And I had to learn all the breath control and embouchure later. He told me to smile when you go high, which is absolutely wrong.
Right, of course. And
it worked, but it's not happening.
Yeah.
And he didn't tell me about diaphragmatic breathing, And so, I wish I had learned that from the beginning. It sure made life simpler. But we all have our own journey.
Sure. It's great that you got the music, though. That's more important, really, because the other stuff, you've clearly picked it up anyway. But
it's carried me through.
Exactly. That's awesome. Well, in 1966, it presented you the first opportunity to play with a true jazz master in Roland Kirk, and I was wondering if you could maybe share your thoughts about what that experience was like, and then, of course, you went on to have a relationship with him, and just kind of share your feelings about that.
Things went on from there. Well, my older brother, Michael, one time he brought home this Rahsaan. Well, it was before Rahsaan. It was Roland Kirk, and it was a record called We Free Kings. And man, it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. And I was going to school at Sacramento State College at the time. And I heard that Roland Kirk was going to be in San Francisco at the Jazz Workshop. So I drove down from San Francisco to Sacramento, and Friday night went to the show, went back to the show Saturday night, because he blew my mind. Mm-hmm. And I was underage. You're supposed to be 21 in California. And I put on a fake mustache. It's funny. And I got there early, paid my money, and sat in the back and ordered a soda. And they knew, but they let me slide, you know. And so after the show on Saturday night, he said, well, folks, tomorrow we got the Sunday session at 3 o'clock. Come and bring the kids. And I was so moved. Afterwards, I went up to say hello to him and just shake his hand and let him know that I appreciated what he did so much. And then I said, Roland, you having a session tomorrow at 3? He said, well, no, it's not really a jam session. It's a matinee show for the kids where they don't serve alcohol and people can bring their children, you know, to introduce them to the music. He said, but it's for kids. Do you play it? I said, yeah. He said, what do you play? I said, trombone. He said, well, bring it. Come and play. And there's kids going to be there and everything. I said, okay. So I went and played with him. And he liked it and asked me to stay and play that night. So I stayed and played the last night at the club, played all night. And then we exchanged numbers. And when he would come to town, he'd call me and I'd do the week at the club with him, but he'd give me $50 for the week or something. I didn't even care. It was like going to school. Man.
Sure.
I was honored just to be there.
That must have been an amazing feeling.
Oh, man. It was during the inflated tier period. Mm-hmm. And he was at full power. So it's unbelievable.
Very cool memory. Your first big professional break came with Ray Charles joining Ray's band in 1972, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about what it was like touring with Ray and the feelings you had getting that big break at the time.
Well, there's 2 gigs that I auditioned for, and they're both good ones. Ray Charles and Saturday Night Live.
Indeed, both good gigs, that's for sure.
And I auditioned for Ray, and, you know, he liked what I did, but he said, well, we already have 3 tenor trombones. Do you play bass trombone? And I had a horn with a trigger, so I said, yeah, you know, because I wanted the gig, you know. And so it had a lot of low C's, but not a whole lot way down in the pedals, you know. So I got through it. And then I got a little larger real bass trombone, but it ended up that I didn't stick with the bass trombone. To me, it's a different animal. The bass trombone is like a different instrument. It's a different animal than the tenor trombone. It's a different blow. It's a different technique. When you improvise, the conception is a lot different too. At least for me, it was. Mm-hmm. I had the phrase differently because of the register. Because, you know, a lot of bass trombones, when they play a solo in jazz, they'll just play in the tenor trombone register.
Right. Yeah.
And I would try to play down and utilize the trigger. And I said, man, I'm going to just stick with the tenor.
I know the feeling whenever I have to play a solo on bass trombone, I feel like I'm just scuffling because I'm putting it in the tenor range and it just feels like the wrong thing to do.
Yeah. It's a different animal. But I got a lot of great experience from doing that and just listening to Ray sing every night. Oh, man, it give me the bump. Every night he'd sing Georgia, and every night I get my hairs would stand up and stuff. You know, it get me every time, man. Ray was pure feeling. Everybody loved Ray. It didn't matter what he was doing, blues or country music or R&B or jazz or his own stuff. It it was all about feeling, pure feeling.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I never had the pleasure of playing with him, but every time I've heard him, it just exudes music. Just gets you.
Yeah.
That's a great story. That's very interesting. Well, 1973, now you hooked up with Art Blakey. Maybe you can talk about that experience. And then I believe that kind of led you to move out here to New York. And and what was that like, just that whole experience? And then how did you get out here? And how was it once you got out here?
Well, Ray tours like 10 months a year. Then he takes a couple of months off. He'll break about a couple of weeks before Christmas, and then he'll go back in March usually. And during that break, I went back to the Bay Area. And while I was gone that year, 72, Woody Shaw had moved to the Bay Area. So I heard he was there, and I went down and saw him and ended up talking with him, ended up sitting in, and we ended up being friends. And in May of that year, Art Blakey came through town. And Woody was going to be on the gig, so he said, "Come on down, I want you to meet Art. He loves trombone. I want him to hear you." So I went down, and Woody introduced me, and Woody said, "Go on, man, go on." And I was kind of scared of him, man, because I had all the records with Curtis and everything. Oh, man. He said, "Well, Mr. Blakey, could I sit in and play a song with you?" "All right, get your horn, come on." So I went up and played, and I ended up playing the set, and then I ended up playing the whole night. And then after the evening was over, he said, "You want to join the Jazz Messengers and go to New York?" I said, "When?" He said, "Now pack your bags and finish the week and be in the studio at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning." And I said, my jaw hit the floor. And I said, well, he said, "You heard me. He'll tell you where to go, So that's that record I did with Art. But I had just sat in the night before. I didn't know any of the songs. I was scared to death. I didn't know what was going on. And Woody had 2 tunes on the record, and he wrote out a third part ensemble for me. And I just played ensemble, but I was on the record, and John Hendricks was there, and that's when I hooked up with Cedar. Cedar was in the band, Carter Jefferson on sax, Mickey Bass on bass, Ray Montilla on congas.
Wow, what an amazing story. That's incredible.
And so Art brought me to New York, and I stayed with him. He put me up for a couple of, maybe a month, something like that, till I found my own place. And I ended up temporarily staying with Lou Marini and Joe Randazzo. They had a big apartment on 96th Street, or 98th and Broadway, 98th and Broadway. And I stayed there another month or so until I found my own apartment. And during that period, it was pre-Wynton Marsalis. So Woody had left the band to do his own thing, and Bill Hartman came in, and there was a lot of transitions. And Art wasn't working as much as he did later when Wynton came in the band. Mm-hmm. And the trombone was the extra horn, depending on the money. If he had money, he'd add the third horn. Otherwise, it was a quintet. Mm-hmm. And so I got a chance to go play with Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, because John, who I knew from the Bay Area, was playing lead trumpet. And I ended up doing a European tour with Thad and Mel, and then a West Coast tour with them, Monterey Jazz Festival and all that. Boy, that's the best big band I ever played with. Unbelievable. Thad and Mel.
Yeah.
Oh,
of course.
Man. And his writing, and oh, man, you talk about getting the bumps. Those voices used to make my hair stand up being in the middle of that.
Such a dynamic leader, too. He just said, another guy who just exuded music and his whole mannerisms.
What an honor, Yeah. And went on from there.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, you brought up the name that I've been dying to talk to you about, and I really appreciate you doing the interview. And as soon as you said okay, I was like, this is really what I want to focus on a lot is the great Woody Shaw. And for my money, one of the greatest musicians of any instrument, but certainly in the lineage of great jazz trumpet players, Woody has a very prominent place in that list. And I think, you've gone on to do some amazing work since then, but certainly that seemed to be some of the most kind of noteworthy playing up to that point, and then also brought you to the attention of international jazz audiences and critics all over the world.
Definitely.
So with that in mind, if you could talk to us about anything and everything you'd like to talk about with Woody, I was particularly interested in your opinion about how he approached playing and writing and what his, like some of, I just mentioned to you before the interview, I listened to Rosewood this morning, one of my favorite records, and what it was like in the recording process. And then the one other thing I was going to ask you about with regards to Woody is, it's a pretty bold step that he replaced the saxophone with the trombone. It was a great step, and obviously you had a great musician in yourself to do that, but that seemed to be a pretty bold move, and I was curious of your thoughts about all of those things. So
Woody caught a lot of flack for that.
Hmm.
Yeah, he caught a lot of flack. But Woody was an intense person, and that's why his music had that intensity, and it wasn't a negative intensity. It was just that he believed in what he believed in, and he wasn't scared to say it. So many people are trying to be politicians, and no matter what somebody does, oh, that's cool, there's no wrong, and you can do what you want to do, and there's no rules and all that. But Woody believed in the music and in its roots. Now, he pushed boundaries, and he was an explorer. And he was all for taking chances. He played with Eric Dolphy and all that stuff. It wasn't about being scared to try something new, but it was about having your stuff together and being for real. And he was intense all the time, even when he was being gentle and delicate or sensitive. He had this intensity about him that was like 100% focus, like, and that's just the way everything he did was. And it came through in his music. But what did you had something, and I lost my train of thought.
Well, I was curious about, when I listened to Woody, there's so many aspects of his playing that seemed very innovative to me. Certainly the harmonic content that he introduced, and then also the use of intervals. I mean, he seemed like the first brass player to start using fourths and wider intervals in his playing. Yeah. But and also what it was like, kind of like touring with him. It must have been. Like you're saying, must have been an intense period playing that music on a nightly basis.
He was with Columbia, and then later Electric Musician. He was a top cat. He was touring like all the time. We worked a lot, 6-night-a-week gigs back then. We'd work 2 or 40 weeks a year anyway.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was a lot. And a lot of 6-nighters. So that's when you get a chance to really get your stuff together, because when you play the music every night, after a few nights or a week or whatever, you don't have to look at the paper anymore. And then you start really playing the music. Mm-hmm. And you start listening and playing what you hear instead of what you see. And I remember, too, I'll get back to that, but Woody caught a lot of flack for not having a saxophone in the band. Because the traditional jazz quintet is trumpet, saxophone.
Sure.
And Woody said trumpet, saxophone, trumpet, saxophone. I'm tired of hearing that. I like this sound. It's a new sound. It's fresh. Don't you like it? And then the club owner would say, well, yeah, it sounds good. He said, well, do you got a full house? He said, yeah, the place is packed. He said, well, then shut up and leave me alone. Let me play my music.
Good for him. That's great.
He was like that. He'd speak his mind.
Yeah.
But that's why he played like that. You dig?
Yeah, absolutely.
And his harmonic thing, and the intervals he used, he cited 2 references. He worked with McCoy, and of course that comes from Coltrane, through that lineage, and also through Eric Dolphy, who used a lot of different intervals. Big time. There's this one tune, I have yet to learn it, but it's called Miss Ann, and it's got the craziest intervals in it. And he played it with Eric Dolphy, and I said, man, what, have you ever heard this song called Miss Ann? He said, oh yeah, and he just whooped it right off like that. And I was like, wow, you remember that? He said, yeah. So I was rehearsing with Eric, and he encouraged us to stretch out, so I was playing some different stuff, and all of a sudden he stopped the band. He said, stop! What's the chord there? What did he say? E flat minor, 7 flat 5. He said, okay, cool. I just want to make sure you knew where you were. Carry on. Because he said they were way out there, but he said he just wanted to make sure you knew what you were doing.
That's great.
And Woody showed me those intervals, but I couldn't execute it the way he did. I mean, he's going that fast, you know. And I had to figure out a different way to use the intervals. So instead of making waterfalls out of him, like he could execute them so rapidly and clean, and articulate. See, none of the young brass players today seem to want to articulate the way Woody or Freddie or Dizzy or Lee Morgan or Clifford and all that. Their articulation is so clean, man. And they use the tongue, and your tongue is the rhythm. You know, you express the clarity of rhythm through the clarity of your articulation.
Exactly.
And the same with trombone. You know, that J.J. Curtis, you know, Rossolino, all that articulation gives the clarity.
Yeah, no
question. And Woody talked about the articulation, and he loved Lee Morgan. Of course, he loved Freddie too, and Dizzy was the champ. So I remember one time, Woody, I bumped into him. He said, "Well, what you doing Thursday night?" And I said, "Nothing." He said, "You still got your car?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Will you take me to the half note and give me a ride and be like some moral support?" I saw Dizzy, and he asked me to sit in with him, and I want you to come and hang out with me, give me a little more support. You know, that's Dizzy Gillespie, you know. So we went down there, and Dizzy went and played a couple of tunes, and he asked Woody up. And we're sitting at the table right off the stage. And Woody went out and did his thing, and like always, it was super intense, and he was dead serious, but it's not competition. There's a big difference here. He was being himself. He's not that I'm going to do anything better than you can. I'm going to play louder and higher and faster. You know, it's not that stuff.
Right.
It's just being himself, and he plays with that intensity every night. And I know because I played with him. So he went out and he did his singing, and while he's playing, Dizzy come over to me and listening at the table, and then he whispers to me, he said, "Man, he sure got his own thing, doesn't he? Man, that's beautiful. I like that." I said, "Yeah." And then Dizzy went out and played, and it was like father and son. I mean, Woody was my man. I love Woody, but Dizzy, it was like father and son. And, you know, Dizzy was using intervals before any of the brass players, really. If you listen to the break on Salt Peanuts, there's this one break, you know, they got that, and that's the rhythm. Bird was going bop, 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 and Dizzy was beep, beep. They weren't jumping octaves.
Right.
Dizzy told me we didn't go dot, dee, dot, dot, dee, dot. And he said, no. Bird was going bop, 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 bop. Wow. It was two parts, but their rhythm was that tight that it sounded like one person. Their attack, they matched attacks.
Yeah.
You know, it was deep. And there's that one break, do dee da 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 bop bop bip bip. That's all fours. Put it little bop bop bip bip. Put it little. You know, man, God, and that was all fours. So Dizzy was doing them intervals way back.
That's a good point. Yeah, you don't
a different way,
right?
Not the Coltrane way. The bebop way, but he was using those intervals, and you know, Dizzy stretched not to try and get what he was just doing his thing, because Dizzy played some different scales. He had these scales where he keep the middle finger down, do stuff with the third out, some different stuff, man, like alternate positions. In fact, on that, I played with Dizzy, and when he showed me that break, you know, I was trying to start on the B natural, T do dee da da dee da do dee da do dee da do dee B natural, you know, and he said, "No, play the E in fifth. Go do dee da B 4 5 4 5 3, then the 1 da da dee da do dee da." You know, and I said, man, he knew about alternate positions. He taught me a lot. Dizzy taught me a lot about alternate.
Wow, that's really
Dizzy was a genius, man.
Yeah. Oh, no
Woody was in his own way too, but I respect the lineage. You know, Woody did too. Woody said, "Give me some moral support." He said, "That's Dizzy Gillespie," but Woody played his butt off, man. You know he did.
Yeah.
You know, and he allowed me freedom to explore. He had this tune called Moon Train, and the first part is pretty regular. But the bridge, at the end of the bridge, there's this sequence. It's all in sus fourth chords. And bum, 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 bum. And they don't move like 2 5s at all. You know, it's a different kind of motion harmonically. And Woody used to just cruise through the first part would just B flat for 4 and A minor for 4 and all that. It's easy. And he cruised to that. And then when he get to those hard chains, all of a sudden he'd eat them all up, you know. And for me, it was the other way around. I'd be playing all my stuff during the easy part. When it get to the changes, and I'd simplify it, because I wanted to really be making them. I didn't want to be BSing.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be jiving on them. I wanted to really play something with substance on that harmonic thing. And one night I went for some stuff. I don't know what I was doing, but I just went for some stuff, and I felt like I fell down. But I got back up and rolled and got right back on my feet, so to speak, and fought my way out of it, you know. But I felt like, oh boy, that's, you know, you got to try. You know, you don't get things together unless you try. You know, that's part of it. You got to make mistakes. That's how you grow.
No question.
And he allowed me to do that. Anyway, I didn't say nothing. After that course, I got on out. And Mulgrew Miller was playing piano, and Mulgrew was playing his piano solo. And Woody come over and he put his arm around my shoulder. Say, hey Steve, you remember that stuff you played coming out of the bridge on your third chorus? And I said, huh? Woody had photographic memory.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not kidding you. Photographic memory. You know, he had retinitis pigmentosa. He could not see well.
Right.
Very, very limited vision. So he'd go, like, you get a piece of new music, I'd write a chart for the band. He'd hold his trumpet in his hand like this, and he'd put the music like this. And he'd look at it and finger it on his trumpet. And then he'd give me the music back, say, okay, count it off. And he'd have the whole thing there, and he'd never forget it. Wow. It was like a picture in his mind. Yeah, Gary Simonian got that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Did he have perfect pitch as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Woody had perfect pitch. He could tell you the squeak on the brake to the car is 5 octaves above middle C or some stupid stuff, you know.
That's awesome.
But he said, what was that stuff coming out the bridge on your third course? You remember that? I said, oh, that mess. Oh, man, I'm sorry, man. I was just trying something. He said, no. I like that. I haven't heard anybody do that on the trombone before. You know, keep doing that. You'll figure it out. Just land on your feet. I don't care what you do as long as you resolve it. You can go for something. Just resolve it. You know, it's like a cat. You throw it up in the air and whatever happened, he'll land on his feet. Just land on your feet. Bring me out of it. It's cool. I said, really? He said, yeah, that's all right. Okay. So, you know, I started trying stuff. And what I figured out with the fours, I'm still working on trying to execute them rapidly, but, you know, when you play in that style, it's a rhythmic statement as much as anything else, more than anything else. It's a rhythmic statement. And Woody did intervals like in patterns that would fold into themselves. So it's like a waterfall, and then you just come out and resolve it to where you want to resolve it. But I couldn't execute it that fast because I have to tongue every note and do the slide too. And I figured out a way to just make lines out of open intervals instead of waterfalls. So more melodic lines, and I use it that way, or I use them. JJ used fourths in melodies.
Yeah, right.
You know.
Yeah, for sure.
He really did. But I do lines with the fourths, not just melodies. And then Woody, McCoy, Coltrane, Bobby Hutcherson,
right? They
all like the do dee. Oh, be da 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 dee da 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 dee dee da da dee dee da da dee dee. But they go, so it sounds like this. It sounds like that, and it just tumble down, and then they move. So it's like if you got a musical palette, and you take your paintbrush, you can just paint up or down. You can move the color anywhere you want until you resolve it. And that was a concept. We're thinking more in terms of colors and rhythmic motion and then resolution. Of course, you know what the chords are too and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
But it's just another way of thinking.
What a great, thanks for sharing all those memories. I mean, that's like amazing stuff. And then to be around a guy that inspiring and open. It must have been a fantastic experience and development in your as a musician and brass player to be inspired by that on a nightly basis.
But I tell you, I've been so blessed to play with the people I play with because I learned a lot. Of course, Woody, it was during the period with Woody that I found my own voice. And he encouraged that. And so it was during that, Mulgrew too, during that same period, Mulgrew found his voice. And man, that band, that's the best band I ever played with in terms of being together for a long time and not just a moment, but a unit, man. And we couldn't wait to get to the bandstand because once the final personnel came together, Woody, Mulgrew, Stafford James, Tony Reedus, and myself, after maybe 5 months or something, then it really gelled and it was just like many bodies, one mind. And we could, all kind of stuff would happen without even rehearsing this stuff. And we just couldn't wait to get to the bandstand to see what was going to happen that night. Yeah. But I learned that from Woody, but I learned a lot of stuff from other people. Like I told you about stuff I learned from Dizzy. And Dizzy taught me about phrasing and how important dynamics is to phrasing. Oh man, he really busted me. And I just didn't know the concept. But if you listen to the records he did with Bird, you can hear it as clear as day, but you wouldn't have thought of it. We did a gig, and the only rehearsals Dizzy had were sound checks. And if I didn't know a tune, he'd show it to me at sound check. And he'd play it slow for you. He goes like this, and he'd play it for you. I mean, something like Sure Enough. I learned that at the sound check. So I'd ask him about the bridge on Confirmation. I said, I've heard a lot of different versions of the bridge on Confirmation. How did you play it with Bird? And he showed me, and so he showed me a phrase at a time. Dee da 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 dee da. So I played it, and he said, I said, well, could you play it again? And he played it again, and I imitated it. He said, I said, well, I thought I played what you played. He said, well, you played the notes I played, but you didn't play what I played. Play it again. So I played it again, he said. I said, well, what am I missing? He said, you played the right notes and you played the right rhythm, but you didn't play what I played. He said, you went dee da 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 do dee da 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 do dee da 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 da, and they're all the same dynamic. And that's what I hear coming out of these kids in the school today. Everything is, I call it flatline music. Everything is the same. It's almost like a computer on playback. It's flatline emotionally. But when Bird did it, bwee da ba dee da ho do dee da do dee da. See, and some notes are louder than others, and they got rhythmic emphasis, and that's what makes it come alive and swing.
Sure, yeah, of course.
And then I started really listening. When I played with Dizzy, I'd listen to them and start matching that, and all of a sudden they clicked, and I said, oh man, this is a whole nother way of hearing. It really made a difference.
Wow, yeah.
And then with Roland Kirk, I learned so much from Rahsaan, man. You know, Rahsaan would play the whole history of the music in the course of one night in a gig. He didn't just play one way. And he played New Orleans and pull out his clarinet. And then he played the slow blues and played the flute and talk on the flute. And he played Ellington style. He played bebop style, modal style. He played free. Boy, he could take it all the way out.
Yeah.
You know, he played everything. And one night, and this is when I was young too, back in San Francisco before I come to New York, he went into an Ellington thing. And so I'd heard JJ, and I started out, my first improv was traditional, New Orleans. So I knew Saints and Muskrat Ramblin' and Bourbon Street Parade and all those kind of songs, you know, and I could tailgate. And then all of a sudden I jumped to bebop. I heard JJ and it was like, oh man, I didn't know you could play trombone like that. You know, so I jumped over there trying to get with that. And so Roland Kirk played an Ellington song, and I know the tailgate didn't fit, so I started phrasing like JJ was more bebop style. And so Roland said, don't play no bebop, this Ellington. And so I just kind of finished my course and got out. And afterwards I asked him, I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you know, different different styles have different nuances and different phrases. It's still a language of the blues, but there's phrasing that goes with that approach to sound, to that style of jazz. Different eras as the generations change, the music evolved. And he put on some records for me that he used to carry records with him. He had a Sidney Bechet record with Vic Dickinson playing the feature solo. Mm-hmm. Then he turned me on to Trummy Young and Jack Teagarden and J.C. Higginbotham, all them cats that came before J.J. And I didn't know about them. You know, and I said, well, that's cool. Yeah, I like that. But, you know, that bebop and JJ, man, I never, yeah. He said, well, you try and play that. and so I got the record and tried to play it, and I couldn't do it. Like Dickie Wells. Right. Dickie Wells is a monster. You know.
Yeah, well, it's some great, it's like a wealth of jazz experiences there. But let's shift gears just a little bit now and kind of talk a little bit about, in addition to your prolific jazz career, you've held down the trombone chair with the Saturday Night Live band now for 30 years, and you know, arguably one of the most prestigious and lucrative bands in the history of television. I was curious what that feels like for you. It's obviously a completely different thing than your jazz side of your career, but what's that like, being in that kind of intense live television atmosphere and doing that for so many years ongoing?
It's a lot of fun. I mean, what other job can you have to where, you know, you play music on the highest level? Man, all the musicians in the band are good musicians, man. Ain't nobody jiving, you know. Of course. And there's a lot of charts that they're funk and they're rocky, funky, but they're slick, and some of them is tricky, man. You know, you got to be on your P's and Q's. You can't just go in there and coast. You got to be on your toes. But at the same time, you know, when the light come on, you hit and it's intense, and then the rest of the time you're laughing your butt off. You know? So I mean, it's really fun. It really is, you know. And I've seen the show evolve, and cast members come and then go on to be big stars, and yeah, it's really wonderful to be there, you know. And Lorne Michaels, man, he's something else, man. He's a special cat, man.
Yeah, to keep that going at that level for so
man, and the amount of in that area of art and comedy, his lineage, his legacy, unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk a little bit now about your solo career, because it's quite prolific as well. You've, as I said earlier, you've released 16 CDs as a solo artist, and one of the things I always found as I followed your career through your recordings is you've evolved and you're constantly growing, and that's one thing that's always inspired me. And in addition to the incredible playing you do with the trombone, you've introduced the C-shell as a solo instrument, which is quite remarkable to bring popularity to something that generally was not thought of as a solo instrument. So I was wondering if you could just talk kind of generally about your approach to your solo career and how you've been able to kind of build that into such a formidable part of your overall career.
Well, looking back on it, I think it's an evolution, you know, and I'm glad it didn't happen until I was ready, you know. Mm-hmm. A lot of youngsters today, the record companies and whatnot, the media, go looking for somebody in a school that's got a certain look or something. And they may have talent, but they don't have experience. It takes time to mature, to have your own voice and to have your own direction in music. I mean, an artistic direction rather than a direction of I want to be famous and make money, you know. Mm-hmm. But to have an artistic direction, it takes time because you have to learn. You have to grow. You have to find out what the world is about in order to express your life through this music. Because the music is an expression of life. You know, whatever your life condition is, it come out the end of your horn or through your instrument. You can't pretend, really. And so, you know, when I was coming up, it was about the music. And you didn't get a shot at being a leader unless you were ready. And I'm grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so happy, you know. And so it didn't come until later. I was in my mid to late 30s before I recorded as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And even then I was still working with Woody on and off. And then I started doing Saturday Night Live too. And it just kind of grew, just like this. You know, it wasn't like I said, I'm going to go do, I didn't say, I'm going to go in the practice room and do something different and do these intervals so I can get written up, or I'm not going to do the shells. In fact, I was scared to play the shells in public. I didn't want people to laugh at it because, you know, Roland Kirk played 3 saxophones at once.
Right.
And if you really listen to the records, like Inflated Tear, that's some heavy stuff. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a gimmick. It was beautiful music. He wasn't jiving. But people used to, you know, call it a minstrel act or something. He was very hurt by that. You know, he was sincere with it, and it hurt his feelings if people would make fun of it that way. Because, you know, I guess some people are jealous because he do that stuff. The crowd would say, whoa, you know. And being close to him, I felt his anguish about that, and I didn't want people to say, "Oh, that shell is just a gimmick." The thing that attracted me to the sound of the shell was his tone quality. Mm-hmm. It had such a beautiful sound. It's so resonant and warm. It's healing. When Roland Kirk played a shell, he had a shell. And he would just pick it up and blow a note when people were talking too much in the club. He wanted to play a ballad and people was drinking and yakking, and he just blowed his shell. And Roland Kirk, and I say this for the record, they had that jive publicity stunt when Kenny G released the record some years ago, and he held the note for the Guinness Book of World Records. That's a publicity stunt. Roland Kirk was the champ of circular breathing. Mm. He was the champ of circular breathing. And he held this note on the shell. And after a couple of minutes, you know, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, all of a sudden, even the drunkest people would stop talking and go. And it made the room peaceful. Yeah. It really made the room peaceful. And there's something about that attracted me. I said, wow, that's so beautiful. And you know, peace is a good thing, man. The planet certainly needs it. Yeah. So I like the sound of the shell. That attracted me, and I got one, and I tried it. And at first, I would just, at the last note of the tune, happened to be the note that the shell was in, I'd pick up and blow it on that note. I didn't know how to use it, you know. And then one day, I was sitting in a chair like this. This is in San Francisco before I moved to New York. And I blew on the shell, and then I kind of got tired, and I had a gig the night before, and I sit there and took a little cat nap. And then I picked up the shell with the other hand, and my hand went inside the shell, and I picked it up and blew it, and it was a different note. Mm. I said, oh, man, I put my hand in and out, I could change the notes. And that's how I discovered that I could play a melody. I could get a fourth out of each shell. Ba, 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 ba. So, be da 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 do. With 2 shells, I could play a scale, you know. And that's how I started playing just simple melodies. But the shell is mostly rhythm and simple melody, and then just your personality. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it come alive. It's not about I can't play Donnelly on the shell.
Yeah, no, of course. I always thought it was a really nice compliment to the trombone in terms of the sound. It just kind of, obviously it's different, and like you're saying, it's more from a melodic standpoint.
Yeah, but you know, even within the world of trombone, my favorite players are the ones that have the sound. That's what attracted me to JJ so much, his tone. And can nobody beat that sound, man. I can't believe it. It's like he has sound the same fullness and resonance and presence of people like Joe Alessi or Christian Lindbergh. He's got that level of sound going on.
I agree. Yeah.
Man, and that's what floats my boat. The first thing you hear when you hear somebody play is their sound.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, along those lines, you're active worldwide as a clinician and as an educator, and as I mentioned, you're professor of jazz trombone at Juilliard. I know you're filling in for Robin this year at Oberlin, and you have a long track record of teaching at Manhattan School of Music. What's your feeling about the state of jazz education and where things are heading in that realm?
Oh, well, that's very interesting. I'm glad to see that jazz education is being given credibility now. They're offering masters and doctorates and whatnot. I think it's evolving in scope, but it's still in transition. It hasn't arrived yet, and in a certain sense, I don't know if it ever should totally, and I'll explain. In the early years of jazz education, and I'm not saying this to knock anybody, so to speak, it's just an observation, but a lot of the jazz educators, not all, but a lot of the jazz educators were teaching not only for security of that kind of job, but in reality, they weren't the kind of player that had a personality to go out there and make it in the field as a performer. Mm-hmm. That's a hard road. I've been so blessed. And really, Saturday Night Live has kept my head above the water economically. Mm-hmm. That's been my bread and butter.
Sure.
But it's a hard road to be a performer and to make a living at it, man. It's no walk in the park. And people have families. I understand that and everything, but you got to really want to play to go out there and do it as a performer. And so a lot of the jazz educators in the early years of jazz education, they weren't really performers that were going to make it in the field, but they loved the music and they wanted to teach it, and they did. But when you get people that are out there playing every night to teach it and really live the music, you learn something different from them than you do. What I learned in school, I learned reading, writing, arranging, voicing, how to follow your lead player in a section or follow a conductor, just barely scratching the surfaces about stylistic approaches. They really don't teach that because most of the teachers don't, at least up until recently, don't play. So they don't really play the different styles. I believe if you're really teaching somebody something, you can't tell them about it. You got to show it to them. You got to play it for them. Showing is more important than telling. And for me, my real education, like I said, I learned the reading and the writing and the arithmetic and all that in the school. But then the music, you got from playing with people that play the music. Yeah. And it's an environmental thing. It's like learning a language. You can learn the words, but to learn the flow and the syntax and the rhythm of that language, you got to be in the environment. Now jazz education is starting to have people that are involved in the field working as professionals out there, performing. Also be affiliated with a college, university, and the school will give them the flexibility to continue performing, and that attracts students as well. Mm-hmm. And then so you kind of do both things at once, and I think that's a step up. Mm-hmm. It's definitely exposing the students to all the different concepts that they're not going to get from somebody that's not a real performer.
Right. Yeah.
And it's evolving in that. Where it's going to go, we'll see. But that's where it's at now. But the nature of the music is that the music is always evolving. Now, see, with the way European classical music is taught, Bach, Brahms, Beethoven, and on, Stravinsky, and it's a set thing, and they teach that, and it's codified, so to speak. And there's certain things that are expected to know if you're going to play that style. Well, jazz has that. We have a history, started in New Orleans, and then the swing thing, and the bebop thing, and the modal thing, but it's still evolving. And so how the newer things are incorporated into the education is important, but it's important to do that. But at the same time, I think it's real important that they have to know where they're coming from to know where they're going. If they can't play a blues or they can't swing, well, then are they really taking the music forward?
Mm-hmm.
Because everything has to have a root. The root in the tree is what nourishes it and keeps it alive. The stronger the root in that tree, the more fruit the tree will bear. You know?
Yeah, no question. I think it's
so. It goes both ways to me. I like to have my students find their own voices, and I encourage that. But at the same time, if I hear something lacking, I had some very good students at Juilliard, and I made them go learn Lawrence Brown solo from Duke, and it kicked their butt. But they got it together. They say, "Oh man, I didn't realize this." I said, "Those guys were just as serious about what they were doing as what we're doing now, except that they didn't have the opportunity to go to school like we do. So they had to figure stuff out for themselves."
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, the history of the music is so rich. You have to respect that and have to reference that in your own musicianship, I think.
Another thing that's very important to me, and we didn't talk about it yet, but it's Latin music. Because that's a big part of who I am. And I have a big experience in that. And I love it. And if you notice, I always include it in all of my music one way or another.
Yeah, I have noticed
there's always some clave in there, and it's intentional. I can't not acknowledge that because I like it. It makes me feel good when the music. See, there's different kind of swings. You got the what we call swing, which is like Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, Coltrane, and
Sure.
that's based on the African six.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like real funk, like James Brown, that make you want to dance too. I said my mom and dad met at a Count Basie dance, but James Brown, certainly if you hear that and you don't get up on the floor, then there's something wrong with you. Because that's another kind of swing. But then when you hear real Afro-Cuban salsa, whatever you want to call it, man, that's another kind of swing when the club is there. That make you want to dance too.
Yeah. No question about that.
And they all got their roots in African music, but it evolved differently. That's what Dizzy with the United Nations band. That's what that was about. Is bringing all that together, that whole family.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me feel good. So I believe a musician's like a doctor. You're supposed to make people feel better. So I like to play. If it make me feel good, then that's going to make somebody. How can I make you feel good unless I feel good about it myself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good advice and good words. Steve, as we kind of wind down, I want to just ask you a couple more questions.
Mm-hmm.
First one is you've done so much in your career. I mean, it's like I said at the beginning, it's one of the most impressive jazz trombone careers in the history of the instrument. And the one thing I know about you is you are so dedicated to the music and you're always evolving and you're always doing new things. With all that you've done, where do you see yourself going in the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years in terms of musical goals that you might have?
Oh, I have a lot of unrealized dreams, actually. Unfortunately, in the world we live in, with the economic inequality going on and everything, it's about money to realize any kind of dreams at this point. A good part of it is about money to get it realized. I have a lot of music I've written that I've never been able to play or record. I have a Juan Tizol project. I mean, he did a whole lot more than write Caravan and Perdido.
Yeah.
But those are great tunes. But he wrote a whole lot of music, and not just for Duke, for Harry James, for all kind of people. And it's good music. So I got a project for that. I got enough music for another recording with Sanctified Shells, with the Shell Choir. which is almost more like world music with a heavy jazz influence. I got a Latin jazz project that I'd like to realize. I'd like to do recording someday with strings and just do some standards, and especially with the plunger, because I'm a big believer in the plunger, and I think that's part of the art of our instrument, and I'm glad to see that people are starting to get interested in it again. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is a big part of it.
Between Al Gray and Tricky Sam and whatnot.
Yeah.
And Quentin Jackson and Tyree was a great plunger man. Ed Newmeister plays good plunger.
He sure does, yeah. Terrific.
And Wycliffe Gordon plays wonderful plunger.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah. So it's being carried on. But that's another project. There's just a lot of things that I'd like to do.
Well, that's inspiring, and I knew you were going to have a good list of great projects in your future. So, Steve, one of the way I like to close out a lot of the features that we've done and the interviews that we've done is we have a lot of young people listening, and when we're fortunate enough to get a great artist like yourself, I like to ask, if you can put it in a nutshell, sort of, if there's a young person out there who's dreaming of a career in jazz, if you had a couple pieces of advice for them, what might you tell them?
Ooh, that's rough. That's a hard one.
I realize it's a meaty one to end on.
Well, from my heart, I have to say that you have to do it because you love it. That the music has to be the thing that makes your life worthwhile. And then the trials and tribulations will not upset your apple cart. There's and it's funny, but it's not just music. But music is a rough road, like I said before, if you want to be a performer and make a living at it. But if you believe strong enough and have enough dedication, perseverance, and discipline, you can find a way. It's not impossible to do, but you have to be willing to have some good times and some bad times and not give up, not get all depressed about it. There's going to be good times. There's going to be bad times. That's okay. That's part of life. Life is like that anyway for everybody. Sure is. And it's not the end of the world if you didn't get this gig or whatever. Just keep going. Play the music and you'll find a way. And I just never gave up, and it's still hard sometimes, but so what? That's like what Miles would say, so what?
Well, Steve, that's great advice. And once again, thank you for taking time out of your schedule today. And thanks for the years of inspiration for all of us, trombone players and composers and everything. You've set the bench, the mark very high, and we appreciate it all. So continued success. And once again, thanks for spending some time with us today.
My pleasure.
All right. We'll see you all next time on Bone2Pick. Thanks for joining us.